Well, it's time for another episode of Things of Interest, and this one is something that I have no words for, except, Super Mario. Where do I begin? Why not just let the back of the packaging speak for itself? Super Mario is a game with time function which has adjusting time mode, automatic demo mode, and game mode. So, if you somehow haven't noticed the title of this video already, this is in fact an LCD handheld in a similar vein to the Game & Watch series. But definitely not officially licensed for Mario's 35th anniversary. Why is this girl on the packaging? There is no explanation. Is that supposed to be the princess? Wei Yi Electron, I need answers! Anyway, I do a live unboxing of this, but I already got it used for a whopping $2. Though the seller was nice enough to not rip the entire plastic enclosure out from the packaging, so we can just slip the unit out nice and clean, as well as the included manual, which is just the text on the back of the packaging but in Chinese. Also, nice fat onion there. Ashes would be proud. Now, purple is my favorite color, it's all over my branding. Purple and yellow is like one of the best color combinations out there. But even that doesn't stop this thing from screaming "I made in China." You got separate directional buttons with an inexplicable smiley face, a whopping 2 start buttons, and a jump button that's very clearly labeled in case you don't know which button you're supposed to press. On the back, the model number is prominently displayed, which you can actually still look up on the web as of this video to find a listing from a Chinese wholesale shop, showing a unit with a slightly different design. Our Super Mario handheld game is popular as promotional, advertising, business, and corporate gifts. I'm just imagining a super serious business meeting and some guy in a suit is just like, "Pleasure doing business with you, have a Super Mario LCD handheld game." Anyway, you guys are probably just waiting for me to turn it on, so let's do just that. Underneath the battery cover that's annoyingly closed with a screw, seriously, why can't you guys just make it a tab? This unit takes the same LR44 or SR44 watch batteries as the older Game & Watch handhelds. And if you're thinking that I said this was a Game & Watch bootleg simply because it's an LCD game with Mario characters, think again. For those of you who still haven't recognized the screen layout, it's almost exactly the same as the official Super Mario Bros. Game & Watch game that was first released by Nintendo in 1986. And yes, that's exactly what this is a bootleg of. While I've certainly heard of LCD games that try to mimic the form factor of a Game & Watch, like these play and time units, haha, very clever, seeing a bootleg LCD handheld just straight up rip off the gameplay of an official Game & Watch game is kind of new territory for me. It even functions almost exactly like an official Game & Watch would, albeit with some slight differences. Hey, Editor AK here, so this might be a bit awkward since I'm recording this after completing the whole video, but after I released it on Patreon, a fellow patron brought to my attention that an official counterpart to the system sort of exists. Nintendo partnered with other companies to release the Mini Classic series of handhelds in 1990, which were basically re-releases of Game & Watch games, and one of the games was Super Mario Bros., in a very similar Game Boy-like form factor. And looking at the character sprites on the bootleg, they seem to be based on this mini version. Though that's basically the only similarities they share, and for the rest of this video, I'll be comparing this to the older official release of the game, and most of my points will still stand. I probably should have done some deeper research to find this in the first place, but this shouldn't affect the rest of the video too much. Alright, let's continue. As usual, you start by setting up the time with the directional buttons. Now, if you're not familiar with the Game & Watch version of Super Mario Bros., I can't blame you. But the premise of Mario saving the princess is kept intact. Though given the inherent limitations of the platform, the game definitely plays out in a unique way. The official game begins with a variation of the Mario theme in LCD beeps. Well, let's see if this bootleg has that. Yes, everyone remembers that feeling when they first start up Super Mario Bros. On the NES and hear that familiar theme tune. Of course, the gameplay would barely resemble anything on the NES and Game Boy, so here every level is an auto-scroller, where basic LCD elements make up the entire level terrain, and you just traverse them by leaping over walls in full Game & Watch style. That's like 70% of the whole game, but I do find it fairly impressive that this game has distinct themes and layouts for each level, considering I thought it'd be more efficient to just make an endless, completely randomized level. But I don't know, I'm not an engineer or anything. The number on the top shows the distance you have left until you reach the end of the level. Once it hits 0, you reach the end where the princess awaits. Huh, short game. Well, according to the manual of the official game, it's apparently an illusion of the princess that guides you to the next level. Sure. And of course, the official game ends a level with the classic level complete theme. But on this knockoff, we have none of that. Not even an original tune. Thanks, guys. Now, the official game has a manual that describes the theme of each level. And impressively enough, this bootleg manages to recreate almost all of them. More on that later. So for our purposes, it serves as a nice reference, because the back of this packaging certainly ain't gonna tell us anything. The game includes 3 barriers and 21 passes. What? Also, amazing text wrapping, guys. Anyway, that last level we just cleared is the canyon, which is just basic sets of platforms. Moving on, we have the gym, which is just a bunch of plush-shaped obstacles. It's so straightforward that even the manual just tells you to move on. Next up is the Burning Room. This is one of 2 single-screen timer levels in the game. You just have to maneuver past these spinning things, which I thought were moving walls. But no, turns out they're supposed to be fire bars, and hitting one would cost you a life. Now that's a creative liberty if I've ever seen one. The Mario Underground theme also plays in the official version of this level, but here we have no such luxury. You're already ripping off Nintendo's IP by directly calling it Super Mario, might as well have just gone the whole 9 yards, you know? Now here's an interesting change of pace. Level 4 is called Channel, as in the aquatic type. Yes, this is a water level. So instead of platforming, you move in all 4 directions while avoiding being squished by the LCD walls. At the end of the level, there's this pretty smooth transition back to the regular platforming view as you reach the Peach apparition again. Up next is Hop. True to its name, there's a bunch of short walls sticking up all over like hurdles, so you gotta hop over each of them. At this point, you might be wondering when actual enemies will show up in these levels, seeing as they're clearly shown in the manual art. Don't worry, we'll get to that in due time. Level 6 is another single screen level with 3 moving platforms you have to jump up. Again, very simple. And finally, we have the maze, which, I get what they're trying to go for with the layout, but it's literally the same structure repeated 6 times in a row. The maze aspect sorta wore off like 10 seconds in. After this level, oh. That's the end. That was supposed to be Bowser being tossed out from his, castle in the sky if it wasn't clear enough. This is actually kind of fascinating since that's not supposed to be where the official game ends. In fact, in that version, after the maze level, there would have been a warp zone-like layout where you have to pick the correct path to move on to the actual final level, which is a gauntlet of spinning LCD firebars. Well, going back to the bootleg, after finishing the maze level, the game loops in a typical Game & Watch fashion, though this time there are actual enemies present. Of course, by that I meant only Bullet Bills and Lakitus, the 2 most iconic enemies from Super Mario Bros. They just randomly appear and move across the screen and cannot be defeated. This is also where I got a game over and probably called it a day on recording footage, because playing on a tiny handheld with a camera in front of you while keeping the screen visible is admittedly a pain in the butt. The official version actually had a shortcut built in where you can start the game from the 3rd loop, but sadly that's not possible here. So overall, wacky packaging and presentation aside, this is actually a mostly faithful transplant of the actual Game & Watch game, though it's kind of a bummer that the game just skimped out on some of the features like the missing final level. And it doesn't even have the alarm function that's basically a staple of Game & Watch units, while the original does. It just feels like a weird devolution of an existing product, which makes sense since it's a bootleg. Though I won't deny that this is definitely a novel item, even if it's just a Chinese ripoff, since as I mentioned, actual bootlegs of Game & Watch units are definitely a rare sight. Outside of a handful of Russian bootlegs that actually did try to copy Nintendo's formulas rather than being Tiger Electronics games, I really thought stuff like that died out after the 80s. But apparently not, cause this thing exists. This Super Mario unit is a lot newer than those bootlegs, that's for sure. It's interesting because when I think of cheap, modern, mass-produced LCD games nowadays, I usually just think of stuff like Tetris clones being slapped on a vaguely Game Boy themed phone case. I don't think I've ever seen one of these being sold in local toy stores. The year 2001 is printed on the back of this unit, so I guess I just wasn't old enough to see them? Though evidently, these are still being manufactured in some form or other today if that website is any indication, so what do I know? Outside of that though, these things are still barely if not documented online at all, so that's why this video exists. If you ever want a Mario themed Game & Watch without paying exorbitant prices for either the original or the newer one that just plays the NES game, now you know where to look. Turns out the answer lied in cheap Chinese bootlegs, who knew? Oh wait, hold on, people are gonna scalp these now that they know about them, aren't they? Oh god, what have I done?